Welcome to the Vantage HR Influencers Podcast. This podcast is sponsored by Vantage Circle, the leading employee benefits and engagement platform.
This global pandemic has prompted corporations to make dramatic changes in the workplace, resulting in total disruption to the employee experience or employee engagement. But despite COVID-19's negative effects, it is likely that we all will agree to one thing, and that is HR managers or organizations as a whole have learned a lot. Some are even saying that COVID-19 may be the best thing that ever happened to employee engagement. Hi everyone, this is Sushmita from Vantage HR Influencers Podcast. In today's episode, we'll talk about employee engagement trends during the era of COVID-19. For the same, we have with us today guest speaker Mr. Manesh Kumar, who is an HR resources and learning and development professional, TEDx and keynote speaker. He is currently the HR manager at EFI. Welcome to the show, Manesh.
Thank you very much, Sushmita. Glad to be here.
So before we start, please let us know a little bit more about your journey in the corporate world.
Well, I started my corporate journey as an engineer, actually, because, in the traditional family ritual, there were only two career options.
Right.
You could either be an engineer or a doctor, right? So I knew I wasn't cut out for medicine. So by default, engineering became the choice, and that's how it started. Okay. So I did my BTech in electronics and communication engineering. I worked for a year as a software engineer as well with Infosys. But somewhere I realized that, working in software wasn't quite utilizing my full potential in some way. And that's sort of when I decided to make the switch to HR full time via an MBA in HR. Okay. And I would say that it's been a very good career choice for me. I think it's been a very enriching journey. I've had the opportunity to work with very different organizations, each one being a world leader in their domain, but very different in culture, the way they operate, and of course, the role that HR plays in the company. Of course, throughout this journey, the HR function itself also has been evolving over the years, as I'm sure you're aware. So, I started my career in HR with ABB. ABB is an engineering giant with a 125 plus year history. I got to work in ABB India's biggest factory in Baroda, Gujarat, before I moved to the corporate office in Bangalore. And then I worked with NVIDIA, a world leader in AI and computing technologies. Very exciting company to have been part of. I was HR partner to the software engineering team there in Bangalore. And now I'm working with EFI, a technology leader in the field of digital and industrial printing and imaging for over 30 years now. Part of a great team. We have a very agile culture, and my role gives me exposure to APAC, which has been exciting and challenging at the same time. Right. So yes, overall, I would say a very satisfying journey, and definitely a good choice to take that turn towards HR from engineering.
Right. So at EFI, you lead and manage the HR portfolio for organizations in the Asia Pacific region. And your focus areas are, as I could see in LinkedIn, leadership development, employee engagement, change management, manager essentials, to name a few. So most of these are tremendously important for the ultimate employee experience, especially during a crisis. So what are some of the things that you had in place in these areas before COVID-19, and what significant changes have you been making since the pandemic?
So the focus areas you mentioned are, addressed through a combination of my role as an HR partner, right, as well as the L&D interventions that we do. And as you rightly said, all these aspects are very important at any point in time, but even more so in the current environment. So, we as a company have always been very focused on enabling both our managers and employees. So we've always had a number of training initiatives, both in-person based and e-learning based, which covered content around these areas. In addition to this, there are, of course, regular connects at individual and team level, which are opportunities to coach and mentor. Significant changes since the pandemic, of course, like most companies have had to do. We too had to revamp all of this, all our HR processes and engagements to be able to go virtual, right? So whether it's our hiring and onboarding or learning and development initiatives, all of them had to go virtual. At the same time, we wanted to ensure that, we still got the right or the best outcome from each of these. So we've been very conscious about it. And we've also been very conscious that in all our efforts, including whether it's leadership communication to all employees or these, smaller connects and interventions that we do, which I spoke about, we've been very conscious that we keep sending out a message that, we're all in this together and that we can lean on each other for support whenever we need to.
Right. So are there any creative things that you have done to keep the dedication going on through these times?
Well, one of the things that we've tried to do is, sort of bring in the element of fun to work. It was always there, but obviously it was more, let's say, differently managed in a more in-person manner. But now we're being much more mindful of the need to reintroduce or to keep going with the element of fun at work. So it sort of helps to break what can feel like the monotony of remote work in this current situation, right? So one major initiative that we've taken at EFI is that we formed a global engagement committee, which has representatives from various regions. In fact, all regions that EFI has a presence in. And this committee will organize one virtual event every month, so that all employees can participate. So, we recently had like a fastest finger first trivia quiz kind of event, which was very engaging and saw very good participation. So that's one very, very creative initiative that's going on. Plus, in our Bangalore office, we always had dedicated internal teams that used to sort of organize, cultural, sports or technical fun events. Those were, of course, in person at the time, but the teams are actively exploring how to, move these to the virtual mode so that the employees remotely can participate in them. And I would say the third thing is that, in our team meetings, we've made it a point to every once in a while, put aside our set agenda and just lighten ourselves up, with games or activities, something to keep the energies buzzing and reminisce about times at the office and sort of build on the connects that we share. So I would say that these things have really helped to keep that dedication going through these very tough times.
Yeah. So most of the people are saying that doing all these things virtually is actually a big challenge. So I'm sure that you must have also faced some of it. So what are the challenges that you faced and how did you overcome them?
Yeah. So, in general, too, these have been extremely challenging times for all of us, and we are no exception. So we've also obviously had to come to terms with the suddenness of the lockdowns initially, and then, of course, the continued environment that we're in of businesses and economies trying to recover globally, right? So I would say, even before the engagement piece, what has become paramount for us is, of course, the safety and well-being of our employees, right? Our employees, the communities they live in, and our customers and partners. So our internal OHS teams, which is the occupational health and safety teams and customer facing teams, they've worked extremely hard to ensure the right measures are taken globally, being sensitive to the COVID situation in each country or region. And another challenge that has been there, which is pertaining to what you asked, is about how do you keep the relationships and engagements going, given the absence or severe curtailment of in-person interaction, right? So one thing we've been doing is, there have been a lot of initiatives that the company has taken in this space. And one thing we've done is we've been doing a webinar and online training series for our industry professionals in print and packaging. So these sessions are sort of taken by the company's industry experts, where, the company's products and solutions are showcased, and attendees are educated on, how to create efficiencies, how to increase revenues, how to run a more cost-effective business, and we've received a lot of good positive feedback for these sessions. We will also be taking our annual users conference virtual for the first time next year. So, participants will get all the same access to top-level executives. There'll be networking opportunities. There'll be in-depth best practice sharing and training sessions. And of course, since it's virtual, it'll be more focused and individual kind of sessions than, had it been in person. I've already mentioned the initiatives around, engagement, but even our L&D efforts, right? We're really focusing on how to make them more interactive in a virtual format. And also talking a lot about the e-learning avenues that are available so that our employees can, utilize all these opportunities available to upskill themselves.
Right. So while doing all this, managers and leaders are the ones who faces the most of the challenges, right? So how can we engage managers and leaders as the pandemic is imposing a significant burden on them?
Yeah, I think, that's right. The pandemic has posed a particularly significant challenge for leadership and management teams of companies. I think the first thing we must remember, all of us, is that, our leaders and managers are human beings too, So they have the unenviable task of trying to make decisions and navigate business successfully through these uncharted waters. At the same time, they have to ensure that teams remain focused and motivated. So it's extremely daunting, and demanding even for them. So I think we have to do our best to support them in their efforts by ensuring there is constant two-way feedback, communication, and doing all we can to sort of help them build an environment that enables success and growth at all levels. That's what they're really trying to do. And I think it's imperative that we support them in their efforts.
Right. So how can employee engagement efforts be maintained in this new world of work?
Yeah, that's a good
Like,
question. I think it's
the
a
thing
work
is,
in
even if we
progress.
return to work like anytime soon, the
Yeah,
efforts will be different, right?
true, true.
Yeah.
True. I think, like I was saying, I think it's a work in progress,
Mm.
and I think in many ways we are rising to the challenge or have risen to the challenge. But for quite some time, we're going to have to keep making the internal adjustments we've put in place now, right? Some of which I've already mentioned. So
Right.
the adjustments to our thought process, to the design of our programs, the work practices. So I think we'll have to keep going with some of those.
Mm.
But I think for engagement efforts to be successful, ultimately we as employees need to play a central role in this. We have to take utmost care of our safety and well-being and of our loved ones, first of all, right? And use this time to make efforts to sort of communicate more with our managers, colleagues, people we trust. It's very important that we don't end up mentally or emotionally painting ourselves into a corner or feeling like an island. It's very easy for that to happen. So we should make sure we don't do that. Use this time to upskill ourselves and participate, give feedback when it comes to company or team initiatives, right, around engagement. Even lead and drive some of those initiatives, by the way. So I think we as employees owe it to ourselves and to our organizations to be engaged and focused, and we must do whatever it takes to get there. And of course, as organizations, we have to keep tweaking our engagement efforts, the changes that we've made so far, and seeing whether it's relevant in the current context at that time or not.
Right. So, Manish, during the pandemic, companies are protecting workers, as you already said, with an increased focus on personal productivity, well-being, and personal resilience. Huge growth in learning and work from home is working great for most of us. So it's said that
Mhm.
COVID-19 may be the best thing that ever happened to employee engagement. What would be your bottom line on this crisis as a lesson learned for businesses?
Well, I suppose it can sound a little premature to conclude that COVID-19 is the best thing to ever happen for employee engagement.
Hmm.
We do see so many reports of job losses, of course, personal losses as well, and also reports of employees struggling to cope with the suddenness of working from home for long periods of time. Right. While you're right, there are many segments of employees who are doing well. This is also true. So what the after effects of all this is on the individual and collective psyche, we are still yet to fully see. So um, I would say that for sure this has been one of the most significant things to have happened, at least in our time,
Hmm. Hmm.
right? I think it has certainly made us question old ways of working or doing business, like nothing else has. It has made us introspect and perhaps even shown us the art of the possible, right? Some of the things that are being done today would have been unthinkable even at the start of the year. So yes, our hand got forced, but
Hmm.
here we are and getting used to the new normal. So I would say that the pandemic situation has made us adapt more, be more innovative. I mean, we keep talking about things like, learning to expect the unexpected,
Hmm.
respond rather than react, right? So
Hmm.
I would say it's probably a real solid test for all those principles we were talking about. And it's a test to see how much we're really able to practice them.
Right. So, your TEDx talk is titled "Limitless Employee." Can
Yeah.
you tell our audience what it was about, what it is about, and can an employee be actually limitless in the current pandemic situation?
Hmm. So my TEDx talk was, about how there are a few things that I thought we as employees can do
Hmm.
to be our very best as professionals, and why it's important given how much of our time and life we spend at work. So I think it's even more important now, with the current pandemic and the way our work life and personal life have got so completely interweaved, right? So
Hmm.
one of the things I spoke about in that talk was the difference between limit and limitation, and how realizing this difference is very important. So
Hmm.
limit is a boundary. It's something that gives scope or context to work or the work environment. It's usually an external factor, like a job description or
Hmm.
a work process or the work culture that is there and so on. But it doesn't have to become a limitation. Limitation is when, because of those limits, we make assumptions, or we close and box our thinking, or we limit our creativity. Okay. So that's
Hmm.
more of an internal thing, a limitation. So it's about realizing the difference. And once we realize that, we can actually, become much, much better professionals. So even now, in fact, even more so, if we can realize that the current pandemic situation is a limit, it's a serious limit, it's a major one, no doubt,
Hmm.
but it's a limit. It's the context that we are in. we should not try to make it a limitation, as to how we express ourselves as employees. So if we can do that, we can be what I call limitless employees. So I think it's even more relevant in the current situation.
Right. So any HR book or any HR leader that you follow?
Well, I think there's a lot of very good content out there today, probably much more accessible today than ever before as well to all of us, right? So I often find myself saying this, but one of the good things probably that's come out of this pandemic is the way conferences have opened up to public, in the virtual format. So many of these conferences would have been limited audience or closed door events, but now they've just opened up to everyone. So I think there's, in addition to that and the blogs and so much e-learning content, there's plenty for all of us to benefit from. So I find myself relating to leaders or their thoughts, depending on context. So I don't think it would be fair for me to make an absolute recommendation. I would encourage audience to explore, find what works best for themselves, given their situation, given the aspirations and personal choices they may have. So, follow the book or leader that works for you. It may not only be in HR, by the way, it can be in any sphere.
Yeah, right. It depends on each of us interest, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
So how can listeners reach out to you?
The best way is on LinkedIn. You can look me up on LinkedIn and message me or connect with me, and that's how we can connect.
Okay. So that was a really insightful conversation, Manesh. Thanks for your time, and thanks a lot for joining me.
Thank you once again for having me. Pleasure.
Thanks for listening to Vantage HR Influencers Podcast. Please do subscribe to Vantage HR Influencers Podcast on Apple Podcasts and Spotify for new episodes.